it's time for us to talk consumer tech. And in this segment today, we have Philip Ashon joining us. He's the head of production here at the Citi TV, and also he's the host of Citi Trends on Citi FM 97.3. Now, today we want to talk about our gadgets at home, all right? And a lot of the times you find that we position our gadgets in spaces that actually are problematic, all right? Because gadgets will end up having shorter lifespans than they need to, simply because we don't give them enough ventilation. Let's talk about this morning. Good morning, Philip.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Fantastic. I'm really good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I mean, like you said, there are a number of gadgets that, if you're at home, if you're working from home, or if you cast your mind back to, your home, there are a number of gadgets that are around your house that typically are supposed to be very well ventilated in order to ensure that they perform optimally. Now, because of the availability of space, sometimes we compromise on the spaces that we provide for these machines. And basically, I just thought that we highlighted the importance of ventilation for a lot of the machines that we have, so people get a better appreciation of why they need to keep the spaces around their devices open so that there's ventilation. So, I mean, mainly at the heart of it, ventilation is important because the machines that we use at home, from laptops to microwaves to fridges to freezers to dishwashers to microwaves to whichever one it is, they are machines at the heart of it, which means that there is some sort of electrical power coming into the system.
Okay.
It is being used by different components of the machine, and then an output is expected, either washing of clothes or drying of plates or washing of plates or washing of whichever things that you want to wash, or boiling water or whatever. Now, as we know with most machines that we are very conversant with, no matter what machine it is, so far as there is some activity happening, there is some heat
generated.
Produced. It's like your body. If you run, you will sweat because there's heat being produced. It's the same thing with a machine. So far as it is running, so far as it is performing an action, there'll be heat that will be generated. The thing is that the heat needs to be allowed to move out of the system, because if it stays in the system, it's going to compromise the system. It's like when you have a fever or you have a temperature. The higher the temperature, the more likely question marks to be raised about your state of health. So, for example, when you walk into most offices these days, there's someone with a temperature gun measuring, or at least trying to get a sense of what your temperature is. The higher the temperature, the more likely you probably are harboring something. Corona or whichever. So clearly, the higher the temperature, the more likely something is wrong somewhere. So if you, for example, take your fridge and you're constantly feeling a certain amount of heat around your fridge when you get close to it, it should tell you that there's something wrong. If you have a microwave, typically it's supposed to heat up the food inside. But then if you realize on a consistent basis, sometimes you put the things in it and it's not heating as much as it should, or the body or the unit itself is really hot, but then the product that you've put into heat is not heating as well as it should, it's most likely there's something wrong with the ventilation. Now, with most devices, there is supposed to be air coming in to cool down the system, and then the heated air is supposed to be allowed to go out. So basically, that is how it works. So, an example is in a kitchen, you will put an extractor somewhere in the kitchen, so that when you are cooking, it doesn't become too hot inside. So you can just switch, just hit a switch, and then the ventilator opens or the extractor opens, and then the hot air is taken out. Now, as the hot air is being taken out, at least you have a window that is allowing cool air to come in to cool the area. If you don't have these in place, that's why it's not very advisable for you to, for example, cook in an enclosed space without any windows, because there's going to be a lot of heat obviously generated in that space. So the principle is basically the same across board, but its application is different depending on the device that you are going to be engaged with. Let's start off with everybody's little favorite, a freezer or a fridge.
Okay.
So you have a fridge at home. Typically, you put a fridge in some corner. Almost everybody, for some reason, enjoys putting their fridge in some corner. Like it always has to be in a corner. Now, the problem here is, if it's in a corner, where's the cold air going to come from? And if it's in a corner, where is the hot air going to escape to? So these are just fridges that I'm sure some of you have at home. Some of them obviously high end, some of them not. But then in order for all those things inside a fridge to cool, and these are freezers as well. In order for them to cool, obviously there's a machine process happening around it. Now, if what's inside is supposed to cool, then the hot air is supposed to find its way out because there's an activity happening. So if you constantly put it in a very tight corner, what you're doing is you're actually reducing the ability of cold air in that sense coming in to cool down the temperature of the device. And it's very, very important that we do that. We allow at least some space. Most often than not, when you buy the device, for those of you who bought it, properly packaged, there's some instruction as to the distances. A lot of people don't pay attention to those distances, but at least a 2 meter distance between, for example, the wall and the back of the device, 2 meters on the sides, 2 meters on the front, is good enough for air to, basically be allowed to circulate around the device.
But then people are going to say that then it's sitting right there in the middle of the kitchen. That's inconvenient.
2 meters, some people talk, for example, about 25 millimeters. Some people talk about 50 millimeters, depending on the device that you're looking at. So, I would definitely go for at least 25 millimeters or 20 millimeters. At least have some space between a wall and the device.
And the unit itself.
That at least allows some air to basically some ventilation to happen. Because if the ventilation doesn't happen and you spend 2,000 cedis buying a brand new fridge and your feeling is that it's going to sit in the middle of the room and it won't be nice, well, you can still keep it in the corner. Just know that it won't do the work you want it to, or it will break down much sooner than you want it to. And really, nobody has a lot of money to be spending buying devices just because they didn't position it well. So that's one of the things. So that's it for the fridges and the freezers. Let's look at the washing machines. Typically, people almost everybody has had this initial shock with their washing machine, especially when it's drying and it starts shaking. And like, if you have children, they might be very, very scared because they think the house is going to break down. Now, in order for it to do that, it's clearly a machine process. The drying it's clearly a machine process. If you've been around your washing machine, which hopefully has a dryer attached to it, and it is drying, you realize that there's a lot of heat that is generated through that process. All of that shaking doesn't happen just for any ordinary reasons. It happens because there's a machine process and there's a lot of heat being produced. So typically what is advised is on the sides you have 25 millimeters of space on the sides. On the top, there should be at least 25 millimeters between the top of the device and any roof. And then on the back, where a lot of the tubing and everything is, you should have a minimum of 50 millimeters between the wall and then the back of the device. That is to allow all the tubing and everything, all the water that flows out or the water that flows in, the space, the heat and everything. At least give a 50 millimeter gap between the back of the device and then the back of the wall. So basically on the side you have 25 millimeters, on the top you have 25 millimeters, but the back is where it's most important because it's usually in the back where a lot of the vents are located or a lot of the dissipation of the hot air is done. So it's always best to give it that space. And like I said, there's always all that tubing and everything that you need to consider as well. Let's look at one other thing. Most people have either desktops or laptops in your home. Now, if you have a desktop, you typically, yes, put it in some corner because of the power cable and the mouse that you connect and the keyboard. If you don't have a wireless one, usually you are forced to even give it space anyway. But then it's always recommended that you also give it space, because as most of you probably have been aware, especially if you are into gaming or your kids are into gaming on the laptop, during those processes there's a lot. You can hear a lot of sound, like all of a sudden the machine is almost like it's screaming or it's shouting. It's just because the machine is working a little harder than it typically does. What this means is that more heat is generally being produced because the CPU in the machine is being tasked to do so much more work, or the GPU, which is a graphic processor unit, is being forced to do a little more work than it's typically supposed to. So once you hear some of these sounds from your desktop, just know that this is the process that's happening. If you don't have air conditioning in your house, it's really advisable that you position your computer in a space where it can get easy access to ready ventilation. It's either close to a window or something like that, or at least in an open space such that the back of the desktop is not blocked, and the sides as well, depending on the sort of machine that you have. Some people have ventilation on the side and in the back. If you have it only in the back, that's fine. Just make sure there's enough space in the back to allow some cold air to come in and then the hot air to also be dissipated. Now, for those of you who use laptops on a regular basis, you have some of these devices which are made by different companies, which basically offers extra cooling. So you can see 3 fans in this setup. So you basically place a laptop on the device. It has a wire mesh of sorts, or a mesh of sorts on top of it, and then the fans are connected to it. Some of them, some of these devices basically are powered through the USB of the laptop. Some of them you can connect it to some other, So basically, the whole thinking is that a lot of the laptops that we use today have the ventilation on the underside of it, especially the air that's supposed to come out. So like I said, the principle is cool air is coming into the laptop, for example, cooling the system, and then the hot air is also going out. And so the underside of your laptop most likely is where all of this is happening. Some of the vents are also located on the sides of some of the vents are also located on the sides of the device. So this is the airflow coming in, the hot air moving out. That's what you need to concentrate on. So if you're going to get any device like we are just seeing on the screens there, you have to understand that that's the principle of it. You're supposed to allow hot air to go out and then cool air to come into the system to cool down the system. Now, if you do a lot of very high intensity processing, you are a graphic artist, you play video games and things like that, just know that some of these devices will actually do you a lot of good, especially if you're working on a laptop. You don't want your thighs to be burnt by the heat being produced. So it usually helps to get some of these things, especially for laptops. It's very, very helpful to get some of these coolers to just basically give the machine as much ventilation as possible.
All right. So I think that the general principle here is, if people are to remember the numbers, is to think between 20 millimeters and 50 millimeters.
20 millimeters, 50 millimeters. 50 millimeters usually for the back of the device, 20 millimeters for the sides and then the top. Usually that's because the back is where a lot of the devices end up, placing their ventilators and, the ducts where the air is supposed to pass. So usually it is advisable to have more space in the back of the device. If you have some vents on the sides as well, 25 millimeters just works just fine, but then at least 50 millimeters on the back of the device, you should be fine. Super. Should be good to go.
Thank you, Philip.
Always.
Thank you, Philip. So Philip Ashon has been helping us to understand that. Make sure that you create enough space behind your machines, fridges, microwaves, washing machines, and so on, around 20 millimeters behind 50 millimeters, just so that your machines can last a bit longer. It's less stressful for them. All right, thank you very much. We'll be talking to Philip Ashon, who is the host of Citi Trends on Citi 97.3 FM and also the head of TV production here at Citi TV.
Hi there. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share with your friends.
This is Breakfast Daily on Citi TV.
Join the Breakfast Daily team Monday through Fridays from 7:30 a.m. to 10. Join us for breakfast daily, only on Citi TV.